Welcome to the lecture series of Switching Theory and Logic Design. Our next lecture is Synchronous Counters versus Asynchronous Counters. Synchronous Counters versus Asynchronous Counters. Let us see the difference of synchronous and asynchronous counters. We know that the basic difference is the clock signal. A common clock signal is there for synchronous counter, and different types of clock signals are available in the asynchronous counters. So see the differences of asynchronous and synchronous counters. So the first difference, in a synchronous counter, all flip-flops are triggered with the same clock signal simultaneously. All the flip-flops are working at a time based on the clock signal. Okay, so when you have given the clock signal, all the flip-flops are working simultaneously. All the flip-flops will take at that particular time of inputs and it will process the outputs. So all the flip-flops are working based on the clock signal at a time. Next, in asynchronous counter, different flip-flops are triggered with different clocks, not simultaneously. So, in the asynchronous counter, first flip-flop is completely depends on the clock signal. Second flip-flop will work based on the first flip-flop output. Okay, that is not depends upon the input clock signals. And all the flip-flops are not working simultaneously. They will work based on the clock signals of the each flip-flop. So they are not connected in a common way. Okay, they are connected for the different types of configuration. Based on that, they will work. Coming to the second difference, synchronous counter is faster than the asynchronous counter operation. So the second flip-flop has to wait to get the clock signal behavior. So the clock signal will change or will not change based on the first flip-flop output in the asynchronous counter. But in the synchronous counter, all the flip-flops are working in the same time. So it will give as much as fast outputs. Okay, so it is very faster with compared to the asynchronous counter. But asynchronous counter is very slower one with compared to the synchronous counter operation. Why? Because it is depends upon the previous flip-flop output. All the flip-flops, they depends upon their clock signals is completely depends upon their previous flip-flops output behavior. Next, third difference. Synchronous counter does not produce any decoding errors. Asynchronous counter producing some decoding errors. So when you are doing, there is no chance of getting errors in the synchronous counter. But in the asynchronous counter, we have some of the drawbacks and some of the decoding errors are available in the asynchronous counter. Next, fourth one. Synchronous counter is also called parallel counter. So all the flip-flops are working parallelly. So for that reason, you can call this as a parallel counter. But in asynchronous counter, the first flip-flop output occurred, then the second flip-flop goes to react. So if the second flip-flop output is came, then only the third flip-flop goes to react. So it seems to be a serial counter. So the asynchronous counters were also called ripple counters or serial counters. The synchronous counters we can call parallel counters. Next, fifth difference. Synchronous counter designing as well as implementation are complex due to increasing the number of states. But the designing of synchronous counters is very complicated with compared to the asynchronous counter. But asynchronous counters designing is very easy and it is very less complicated. Actually, there is no complication. It is very easy designing and implementation. The asynchronous counter. But synchronous counters are somewhat complex. It has some complex circuit. Synchronous counter will operate in any desired sequence. So whatever the counting behavior you require. For example, you need even counter. That means the counter has to count only even values. Next, if you want to make an odd counter, that means you want only odd numbers 0, 1, right? So no 0, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. This type of counts you have to perform. So whatever it may be, that is depends upon your choice. Whatever the counting operation you require, the same counting operation you can implement by using synchronous counter. But asynchronous counter will operate with some fixed points only. Okay, so maybe either up count or maybe down count. Like that we can perform. Otherwise, you can continue this counts from 0 to some x value, right? For example, if you have n number of counting operations in your counter, then it can perform less than n counting operations. That is only be there, but it is follows in a particular order. But there is no need of going to a particular order in the synchronous counter. It will work whichever the sequence you are giving as an input. Based on that type of sequence, you can design the synchronous counter. So synchronous counters are very, very flexible, but in the design point of view, it is complicated. Next, coming to seventh one. Synchronous counter examples are ring counter and Johnson counter. Asynchronous counters are example ripple up counter, ripple down counter, mod 10 ripple counter. Like that, we have the different types of counter applications. So here, it is very easy, the different comparison of synchronous counters to the asynchronous counter. The synchronous counter is more comfort and more complex. It is very user comfort counter, but it is complicated. But it is not user friendly. Asynchronous counter is very, very easy to design, but it is not user friendly. That is not customer friendly, right? So both counters are very, very important. Don't say that synchronous counters are good. Don't say that asynchronous counters are good. Both are good, but based on the field of operation. That is based on the field of operation at the industry point. Somewhere they required only the ascending counter or descending counter. At that time they want to put a very less amount of cost. Then they will use the asynchronous counter. But in some of the companies they need some efficient counting. Okay, right? So they are counting. For example, in a shopping complex, almost 5 members coming at a time at the entrance door. So the counter has to count that how many numbers are occurred at the entrance place. So for this type of behaviors, we need synchronous counter, right? So this is the behavior of synchronous and asynchronous counters. Okay, right. Thank you.